Good evening. I'm Janie, and I'm here to tell you a story about the widow of the Gap. Now come on in and mind that door. The night's air's thick with fog and memories, and I'd rather not invite more in than I already got. What I'm fixing to tell you tonight happened long before this world of ours got noisy, back when the Cumberland Gap was still wild and mean, just a slit of the earth between mountains, a doorway between worlds. They say every soul that's ever passed through left a piece behind. Some left footprints, some left bones, and one woman left a light. Her name was Elspeth Harper, but most just call her the Widow of the Gap. She lost her husband to the mountains near 2 centuries ago, and ever since, her lantern's been seen drifting through the fog, burning steady, humming soft, calling to the lost. Some say she's guiding 'em home, others say she's leading 'em straight into the dark. Either way, if you ever see her light, don't follow. Now, have you ever stood at the mouth of the Cumberland Gap come sundown? You ever felt that hush fall over the ridges like the whole world's holding its breath? That ain't just the wind you're hearing. Nope, that's the mountain remembering. See, back in the mid-1700s, long before there was a road or a fort, this place was wild, just deer paths and Indian traces, the kind of land that made men vanish. But there was one woman who didn't vanish easy. Her name was Elspeth Harper, though most just called her the widow. She come through with a wagon train out of Carolina, hoping to reach the rich land beyond the Gap. But fate, she's a cruel hand. Her man took sick on the trail with fever, the kind that burns a body from the inside, and before the moon was full, she'd buried him right near the Powell River. They say she stayed on a spell after that, wouldn't leave them behind, camped alone near the Gap while the rest pushed on. Every night she'd walk the ridge with a lantern, humming a tune no one knew. And some nights, the Cherokee scouts watching from the trees swore they'd heard her call a name that weren't answering back. Then one storm rolled down far from the mountains, black as tar, thunder like the sky was splitting. By morning her camp was gone. The fire pit drowned, wagon washed into the river, and no sign of Elspeth but her lantern, still burning, hanging from a limb. Now you can call it superstition, but from that day on, travelers through the Gap started seeing her. A woman in a faded dress, hair loose and wild, walking the ridgeline with a light that don't flicker. Some say she's looking for her husband. Others say she's warning the lost. But the old ones, they whisper that she ain't searching nor guiding, she's guarding something. Now time went on, and the Gap filled with travelers, scouts, traders, and them wagon trains heading west, hungry for land. But every one of 'em had the same tale, a woman's light seen drifting along the ridge at night. Sometimes she'd stand still as a stone, other times she'd wave it slow, like beckoning a lost soul home. Most folk knew better to follow her, but not Thomas Gray. He was a frontier man, hard-headed, broad-shouldered, thought the mountains were his to tame. Camped alone near Gap Creek one spring night in 1775. Said to his friend before he died, that he saw a lantern light moving through the fog up on the ridge, soft, golden, steady, not the wild flicker of fire or foxfire, but the kind you'd see hanging from a woman's hand. Thomas thought it was a settler lost from the wagon train that passed through earlier that day, so he took up his rifle and followed. The air was still, so still he could hear his own boots crunching the leaves. That light stayed just ahead, never more than 20 yards away. He called out once and twice with no answer. Then he heard humming, a soft woman's hum and sorrowful, like a cradle song sung to no child at all. It come floating through the mist, and the woods themselves seemed to lean in to listen. He followed it to the clearing by the old chestnut stand, and there she was, a woman in a gray dress, hair loose and hanging like curtains, standing still as death. Her face was pale as moonlight, and eyes fixed on the ridge beyond. He said her lantern was burning bright, but the flame cast no shadow. "Ma'am," he called, "are you lost?" She turned slow. Her lips moved, but the words came like wind through a hollow log. "He's waiting on the other side." Thomas said his blood went cold. He took a step back, and her light dimmed. Then she pointed the lantern toward the gap, that dark slash between the ridges. He looked, and just for a blink, he saw what he saw, hundreds of pale shapes moving through the pass, men, women, children, their eyes hollow, their steps were soundless, the dead walking west. When he turned back, she was gone, but her lantern was still burning on the ground, bright as day. He didn't touch it, just backed away, crossing himself and muttering every prayer he could remember. They found him 2 days later, down by Powell River, shaking and white as snow, swearing he'd never cross the gap again. And true to his word, he didn't, nor did anyone in his line. To this day, the Grays'll ride the long way round. Now, most folks reckon old ghosts fade once the people that remember 'em are gone. But the widow of the Gap, she ain't the kind that fades. She's the kind that waits. Come the 1860s, when the war between the states was tearing every holler and home apart, the Gap turned into a passage again. Blue and gray, both some crawling through, marching, dying, burying, and marching again. And the mountain, well, it got hungry. One night in 1862, there was a Confederate detachment that was crossing through, of 30 men, worn and half-starved, led by a lieutenant named Elias Mercer. They'd been ordered to hold the pass, but the weather turned foul. Fog rolled in from the Virginia side so thick it smothered sound, and by midnight they couldn't see a man standing 2 paces ahead. That's when they saw the lantern. Private Harlan Gibbons was on watch when it appeared, a soft gold light swinging low near the trees, moving uphill towards the pass. He thought it was a scout, maybe a local bringing word of the Union patrols. He hollered, the light stopped, then, slow as breathing, it started back the other way. The Lieutenant Elias, he didn't believe in spirits, told his men, "We'll follow her. No woman walks the Gap alone." So they did. That lantern led 'em down into the fog like it was guiding 'em home. But the further they went, the quieter it got. No birds or wind, not even the creak of their gear. Just the sound of boots on wet leaves, and that humming, faint at first, then clear, a woman's tune, old as the hills. They followed till they reached the clearing. There in the mist stood a woman in gray, her face white as bone, her hair loose and drifting like smoke. In her hand, the lantern burned bright, but it cast no shadow. Elias stepped forward, saying, "Ma'am, are you in need of help?" She turned to him, and her eyes were black as coal seams. "I've been waiting," she said. "You come to join the rest." And with that, the light flared, white hot, and the men behind him screamed. When the fog cleared by dawn, not one of them was found, just a circle of burned ground, black and glassy like the earth itself had melted. And right in the middle of it, the lantern, still lit. They say the Union troops who found it tried to snuff it out, but the flame wouldn't die. So they buried it deep under the rocks at the ridgeline and prayed that would hold her. But some nights, when the fog rolls down through the Cumberland Gap and the whippoorwills stop singing, you can see a light floating just above the treetops, moving slow and steady, swinging like it's searching for someone. Some say it's her, still walking. Others say it's them soldiers, marching in circles, following that light they should have feared. Either way, that lantern still burns, and if you see it, you best not follow. Now you might think all that's just old talk, stories from before the highway and the tunnel cut through the mountain clean through. But the Gap don't forget. It don't care about years or men or progress. It just keeps on remembering. Wasn't but maybe 10, 12 years ago when that park ranger went missing. You might recall his name, Samuel Pierce out of Middlesboro. Worked the Cumberland Gap National Historical Park, the side that hugs the Virginia line. He was a good man, quiet sort, knew every trail, every rock, every turn of the ridge. One autumn evening, he radioed the station saying he was checking on a report. Some hikers had seen a strange light near Hensley Settlement Road, high above the Gap. Said it looked like a lantern, old-fashioned, swinging back and forth where no one should have been walking. They told him it was likely campers or maybe poachers, but he said, "No, this light's different. It ain't flickering right." Then his voice went quiet, and the last thing the dispatcher heard was him whisper, "There's someone standing in the fog." They never found him. Next morning, the search team found his truck parked neat as you please by the overlook. There was no sign of struggle, but a few hundred yards off the trail, where the dew hadn't lifted yet, there was a patch of scorched earth, a perfect circle, black as pitch. And right in the center of it, a brass lantern, old, handmade, and still burning. Park officials took it in for evidence, but the odd thing, there was no fuel or wick, just light, soft, golden humming like the sound of a woman breathing in her sleep. That's when the old folks started talking again. Said the widow's lantern had found its way back to daylight. Said the mountain had come due for another soul. Every 100 years or so, they say she takes one, a toll for all them that tried to cross through and never made it. Trappers, soldiers, rangers, makes no difference. The Gap remembers. And when her lantern burns brightest, that's when you know the veil's thin, when time folds and she can walk the path again, still calling the name she died whispering, "John, wait for me." Now I ain't saying I believe every word of it, but I don't go near that ridge after dusk. You shouldn't either, 'cause if you ever see a woman standing in the fog with a lantern that don't flicker, you best bow your head, turn back the way you came, and keep walking till you can't hear her humming no more. And if she calls your name, don't you dare answer. Well, that's all the telling I've got left in me for tonight. The fire's gone to embers, and the fog's crawling back down into the Gap where it belongs. Maybe the widow's still out there, walking the ridges, searching for the man she lost. Maybe she's keeping watch, guarding that pass for the souls who never made it through. Or maybe, just maybe, she's guarding something else. The mountains hold their own kind of mercy and their own kind of hunger, and every 100 years or so, they'll reach out and take a toll. So if you're driving through the Cumberland Gap some foggy night and see a light up on that ridge that don't flicker, don't stop and don't look twice. Just whisper a prayer and keep rolling, 'cause that ain't no ranger's lantern you're seeing. That's hers, and the widow don't like to be followed.